Welcome, everyone. We'll give just a minute for people to pile into the room. I mean, guys, don't get too on top of each other. And if you're in Zoom, we'll give you a minute just to join us. Welcome. Happy belated Memorial Day. Hope you had a great 3-day weekend. Okay. So we are actually coming to you live from the boardroom at LACOE today. Hopefully that will result in some improved acoustics for those of you who are online. For those of you who are in the room, in the case of an emergency, we do have emergency protocols. We actually would run out that door and look for a sign that says 5. It's station 5. So if we were to have an earthquake or something, for those of you who are on Zoom, get under your desk, do what you need to do wherever you are. And we will make sure that everybody here is safe and you take care of yourself. Okay, so just a reminder, and we are on Zoom. This is a hybrid meeting. Hopefully this version, I know we had a lot of troubles last time with the sound, but hopefully everything is clear. But if you find that there's any issues with the sound or the visuals, please drop a note in the chat so people in the room can make us aware. We'll try to stay close. We have a great sound setup here in the boardroom. Makes us a little wondering why we haven't been here more often. It's very comfortable in here. Sounds good. But yeah, the rest of the time, if anything comes up, just let us know. Just some quick introductions here. I'm Evan Bartelheim. I'm the project director for accountability and data literacy. I'm joined by Dr. Hillary Weissman, my colleague. We have some new people here. Roy Lung is our new senior data processing specialist. Jeremy Vinluen, Karina Naharas back in the back. From the assessment unit, we have Stephen Bartlett, of course, and we have another new announcement. It's not quite official yet. She hasn't started her first day, but Sarah Nitsos, who's been with Weisburn, has been a longtime DAN member, is joining our team here at LACOE. We're excited. Weisburn's probably not happy with us for stealing away such a superstar, but we are really excited to have Sarah on board. Hopefully she's in the room too. And then Diane Martin, who's the secretary for the assessment unit. So we have a great new team. We're looking forward to rolling forward next year. So we're going to go through just a welcome and housekeeping, give you some accountability updates, some data updates from the world of CALPADS and some reports coming out, then assessment updates from Stepan. And we also have a special guest today at the end of the show, Stepan Mekhitarian, who's a former DAN member, always a friend of DAN. He's now working for Intuit for Education, doing financial literacy for teens in the school. So he wants to share some of the tools that they have available. And that'll be it. Marcus is not able to join us today from ETS. He had another conflict. So maybe a little bit of a shorter meeting than usual, but hopefully give you the gift of time. So in the chat or in the room, celebrations, any changes? We had some changes. We have new people coming here. So are there any events or milestones or acknowledgements that you're celebrating at the end of the school year? It could be your district was acknowledged in some way, a school was acknowledged, you personally were acknowledged. Maybe you're leaving, maybe you got a promotion, maybe you're retiring. Let us know. If you're in the room, turn to your neighbor and chat. What's on your top list of acknowledgements today? If you're on Zoom, go ahead and drop something in the chat. All right. Well, so we have one person, Carla Contreras, has dropped in. Remind me, where's Carla? She's not Pomona. Carla, where are you? 3 other middle schools were named schools to watch this year. Anybody in the room want to share what was something you're celebrating this year? Nobody retiring, I take it. All right. I know this will be your last DAN meeting. Hopefully, I know a couple people have moved up in the world. I've just seen acknowledged during the LCAP process. I'm like, oh, this person who used to be a DAN member is now a superintendent. So congratulations. So anyway, we will move forward. We did have a few more people who just piled into the room. Make sure you log in here when you can, because we have resources online for you as well. On our Canvas page, we have, as usual, we've updated the Canvas page with the agenda has links to a lot of things we're going to talk about. There are some other things, including some flyers for some upcoming activities. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. It should have been in your OMS notification for today. And just a reminder, the purpose of this meeting is to provide all of our LEAs, our districts, our charter schools, and with the latest information around assessment and accountability. And it's current as of yesterday, which of course nothing was coming out yesterday, but that doesn't necessarily mean things won't change. We always know things are always in flux, and there's a couple things we're going to be sharing about the dashboard that are definitely being discussed further. So these are just kind of previews. If you have any questions, make sure you, if you're in the room, we actually put microphones on everybody's table, and you just have to make sure you push the button if you want to ask a question, and they'll turn the mic on. If you're in the chat, if you're online, make sure you drop something in Zoom, and we'll try to bring those up in a timely fashion. We'll maybe pause periodically to take questions. And so get into some accountability updates.
This is a new setup here. I like it. So as Evan said, we have a few dashboard timeline updates and some local indicator updates. And wow, the sound is really phenomenal. I'm going to say in here. So I'm assuming in Zoom land, it sounds nice as well. Just as a reminder, the next few slides, with just some information. As you can see here, the updated dashboard local indicator timeline for the dashboard is going to open on the local indicators for the dashboard will open on June 3rd. And then we know, as a reminder, it closes on July 31st. Looking at this timeline, just as a few reminders, though, at this point, LEAs, you guys should have already established a plan for collecting evidence, as well as started the evaluation of that evidence. And as May is closing and June begins, probably in the process of concluding and using that information on the 2023-2024 local indicator outcomes data to help you inform the 2024-2025 LCAP. I think most importantly, in June and no later than July 1st is that meeting, that deadline to present the 2023-2024 local indicator outcome data to the local governing board in conjunction with the LCAP. And so this diagram just kind of captures that for you. The dashboard reporting window. So as you can see, on August 19th, 2024, the CDE will be requiring a new submission of the dashboard coordinator registration form for the 2024-2025 school year. to gain access as the coordinator for your LEA. And just as a reminder, even if the coordinator information has not changed, and let's say you are still that coordinator from the previous year, the registration form has to be submitted and approved by the LEA superintendent or the charter school administrator to receive those logins, which is a little bit better than previous where we had the whole summer, we had several months where you had to wait and then maybe remember that you had to then do that process and sign on and get it in. And lastly, just some reminders on the 2024 dashboard release that July, the final State Board of Education meeting, approval for any sort of changes and anything that we do here, we will share with you via our DAN Digest or DAN Flash. Also in August, we have those annual accountability and assessment information meetings, 3 of them consecutive weeks, with the last one being the accountability. Also that information we will sum up and we either put it in the DAN Digest, and sometimes we've also had little DAN meetings to kind of debrief with everyone and answer any questions. As you can also see, the end of year CALPADS deadline on August 16th. So don't forget to get your CELPA's approval on all of your end of year submissions. Also remember that is your cohort data. That's when it's captured. And all that information is certified at the end. It's what is calculated for the state indicators on the dashboard and determined LEAs and schools for your eligibility for the fall time. And then lastly, as we all are waiting, is the gear up for the November 22nd dashboard release, where we expect that private preview to be 1 week before the November 22nd. I don't know if it gives us an entire week or so, but a little less than a week maybe, to start to think about your systems, how you're going to be communicating that information, both internally, externally, in addition to any potential data analysis processes that you have with various leadership groups. I think those are all of our updates right now. Science indicator time.
Thank you, Hillary. So good news. Potentially you can spend your entire Thanksgiving looking at your dashboard, right? So yay. But that is, that will be hopefully give us some additional time to get the information out to our field in that preview window a week before. Because of the shortened timeline, they don't have the potential to do that extended timeline. So 1 week, it's all going to be there for you to kind of look at and make sure that you notify any schools, particularly if you have schools who are eligible for CSI, ATSI, maybe they can exit this year based on that. So if you have questions, when that happens, we'll definitely be sending out more information at the time. Just so with regards to the science, this is kind of the latest on the science. Stephen and I were just up in Sacramento at the RAN meeting. And I just talked to Anthony Kwan, our STEM coordinator here at LACOE, and he's on the CISC Science Committee. So as you know, science will be appearing on the dashboard this year, but just as a metric. So they're continuing to work on the science metric itself. They have to make some decisions this year. So it's limited this year to the following decisions. How the metric will be calculated. Will there be a participation rate penalty? How to include the results for high school students, because it's unique. The high school students have 10th, 11th, and 12th grade to take it. So there are a couple different options that we've discussed in the past, whether it would be, you got a hot mic over there. Also what the baseball card would look like. So the final recommendations are going to go to the state board on July 10th. So that's forthcoming. There's also a meeting of the California Practitioners Advisory Group, the CPAG, on June 6th. We'll send out the link to that. It's good to watch because you kind of get a preview of what's going to be presented to the board. And so the additional details, probably the things that people worry about most, the 5x5, and the status and change cut scores, which lead to the color identification. Those won't be determined until 2025. And then whether or not it'll be used for state and federal accountability, that won't be decided until 2025 either. So there's definitely a few things that are pushed out here. So you don't have to worry this year if the science is going to be incorporated in the CSI, ATSI determinations, or that'll be DA. That's not been even determined yet. But there are the things, there are actually some fairly pressing and things I wouldn't have predicted necessarily with regards to the science that we want to talk about. So as you know, ELA math, I've always used this calculation of distance from standard, right? And it's nice because it allows us to see and to recognize the performance of all students, not just the bubble kids, right? We always had that concern that there's an overemphasis on those students who are right on the cusp of meeting or exceeding meeting standard, right? So DFS takes into account all students, the lowest performing, the highest performing, and it seems like a much more nuanced metric. However, in considering the methodology for measuring the performance of science, the CDE has to evaluate the reliability and validity of the way, not the test itself, but how they distribute scores. Are the scores distributed in a way that can lead to that reliable distribution? So in other words, can we create a 5x5 grid where we see a nice kind of uniform bell curve of schools to make the cut scores for status? And then do we see change year over year? And in looking at the results from the 2022 to 2023, we have 2 years worth of data. They realized there are some issues with validity and reliability related to the using DFS for science that really come down to the difference between the assessment for science and the assessment for ELA and math. So what you'll notice is that there's a bigger, you probably notice this looking just at the results. There's obviously a larger scale score difference between the lowest and the highest scores by grade level. So you have up to over 500 points in some cases, whereas science really is just a 100 point difference. So it's a much smaller scale. And then they noticed that the percentage of students who are above standard for ELA math, about 45%. So you got a good distribution, but science, not so much. And that probably has to do right now a lot with the implementation of the science standards in schools, even though they were adopted a while back. It's slow rolling, getting good quality materials. The implementation has taken a while. And so we see a lot of students, like about 55% of the students across the state are in that near standard. So it's like you see a smaller scale to begin with, and then you see a clustering of scores around just below standard. And then that scale score range, right? It's again, a different scale score for each range because you have that nice linear scale score that goes up from year to year all the way up to like 2,900, right? At the 11th grade level, whereas you have the same scale score range for science. So that presents a bit of a problem. And they provided this, the CDE provided this kind of analogy through a visual graphic here. The top one is how we look at the distance. We would think about the distance from standard typically. Oh, look, we've got kind of the same distribution, right? But in fact, they're not at all. You look at a much narrower range in which we're trying to see the distribution, if it works well, and it really doesn't. And so that's the problem. They don't think that they could create a valid, reliable distribution of scores for schools or for student groups in order to make it work for the 5x5 to work in a year. And so what they're looking at, they also had one other point they like to point out, which is the possible misperception if they use the distance from standard. And so they noted that if a statewide average for ELA was 17 points below standard, for math, 44 points below standard, and for science, only 13 points below standard, the immediate impression is, oh, like we're doing so much better in science. Oh, yay us. But in fact, that's before you take into account the kind of difference in the scales. And so there's a rough translation. There's not really an easy translation, I don't think, or any kind of methodology that could expand it in a consistent way. But they said a rough translation for science would actually be 61 points below standard. So the possible misperception of folks that we're doing better in science than we actually are was another concern of theirs in using distance from standard as the metric. So what they're looking at is using instead the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standard, which has a much broader distribution, both from across all schools and student groups. So that one actually seems to be more reasonable. Now, the members of the science committee, as well as RAND members, expressed some concerns. We asked some questions. We had some concerns about that use, predominantly around that idea of, gosh, is this going to take people back to an overemphasis on the kids on the bubble, right? Are we going to spend a lot more time? And it was pointed out that actually, because of the nature of the test, it's only given in 5th, 8th, and then in high school, right? You really can't. It's not quite the same. You're not going to say, oh, these kids are our bubble kids because they test in 5th grade and then they won't test again for 3 more years. So you really wouldn't be looking so much at the bubble kids. So, but they do have, using percent met or exceeded actually gives you a much wider range with which to develop the metric. So we did ask at the time if they could go back and look at, are there different representations or some kind of mathematical translation of the science test that they could make to distance from standard? So we're waiting to hear. That's why I say the CPAG meeting coming up on June 6th, I believe, we'll be watching closely to see what they take there. I mean, they went back with the input, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's doable, because the kind of concerns that they emphasized are not necessarily things I think could be readily fixed. And it's, it's the nature of the test. This is the accountability folks. They're not the assessment folks per se. The test is already done and out there, right? So, and it's partially due to the ELA math have that computer adaptive component, which allows for a broader range of scale scores. So we'll see. But I think that the justification, I understand it now. My initial thoughts too were on that sense of like, oh, this really seems like we're kind of regressing back to that met or exceeded mindset from No Child Left Behind. But I was assured by CD folks after the meeting that no, that's really not the case. This is maybe the only way we can kind of get it to work as a 5x5. Do you have any questions there?
Yeah, in the chat, very loud. I think Chris had one comment, Dr. Moja, and then had some questions. And obviously, to sum up his comment, he always thinks that there's a struggle with the distance from standard. The variances between the subjects and the grade levels contribute to confusion, especially with educational partners in trying to describe and explain the distinctions between the two. So there were some upticks and some other people in the Zoom land who agreed. But his second question centered around any reports or potential reports that will break out CAS performance by grade level. We normally test the 12th graders. Does that give us any advantage over districts testing CAS in 10th grade? Example, he's saying maybe 1 more year of science, 2 more years of academic growth. Kind of interesting questions.
Well, let me move forward on the rest of the science, because there are some other factors that they talked about, and we'll get to the high school piece in a little bit. The participation rate was another question that came up. So as everybody in this room knows, there's an expectation that 100% of all students will be tested, but at a minimum, ESSA requires that 95% of all students for student groups, for schools, have to be tested. Otherwise, the state has to incorporate some form of non-participation rate penalty. So the lowest obtainable scale score, the loss, which is what they came up with as the model for addressing those student groups or schools that didn't meet the 95%. However, the science assessments aren't actually included. They talked to the Department of Ed. Science is not included in that ESSA legislation to be required to be a penalty need not be incorporated. The expectation is that they still again would test all students, but no penalty was required for that science. However, when the CISC Science Committee, the science people were asked, as well as people that ran about the inclusion of a participation rate penalty, everyone was in favor, overwhelmingly in favor of it for some legitimate reasons, I think. So one, it maintains that alignment with ELA and math, right? And the expectation we're going to test 95% of kids. It then holds schools accountable for testing everyone, right? As opposed to the concern, I think, especially from the science community, was they've been pushing to get science incorporated on the dashboard to give it the same level of importance. To not have a participation rate penalty would diminish that importance again, because you could say, well, there's no penalty if we don't test everybody. And then there are also concerns about the equity. Like, what if we don't test certain groups, like students with disabilities? We know that'll, affect our scores. So we'll just skip testing those student groups. So based on those concerns, there seemed to be a large push, consensus that they should push for inclusion of a participation rate penalty of some sort. Now, I don't know exactly how that would be applied. If you're not using distance from standard, it wouldn't be a lowest obtainable scale score. It might be more akin to the English Learner Progress Indicator, the ELPI, where you just pad the denominator and the numerator to bring up to incorporate the difference. So there were definitely some issues in this last year. And of course, a lot of this is because there was no participation rate penalty. The challenges of administering science, particularly for the California alternate assessment for science, which is supposed to be given throughout the year, embedded within the science curriculum, that presented a problem. So you can see there was definitely some student groups statewide that didn't meet that participation rate. And in particular, there's concern around foster youth and students with disabilities. And, can't speak to all the reasons why. I think that high school would be, particularly for foster youth, might be problematic because of the constant change for a lot of those students in terms of their home district and trying to catch students before they've reached their 12th grade, their final opportunity to test. So there is definitely some concern. And I guess we're just trying to raise awareness. This penalty, by the way, wouldn't be a penalty per se. The state would be sharing the information this year, as with everything they're going to do. It's just sharing this information. So whether or not it would actually be affecting your accountability measures, it wouldn't be a factor until 2025 at the earliest anyway, but it would be out there publicly. Oh, this student group did not meet 95% participation rate. So just be aware of that. So high school, yes, as Dr. Moshe asked, what about high school and would there be different ways? So yeah, there are two different ways that high school could be measured. There could be a current year model where you just capture everybody who tested within your LEA at all grades, right? So 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, wherever. So if you decided you're going to test primarily your 11th graders, you still have some 12th graders who weren't tested the prior year. You may see results for 11th and 12th grade, but whoever tests within that 23-24 school year. An alternative that they proposed was this cumulative score where you could see students, it's not quite a cohort model, but they would basically hold scores. So, right, for this particular year, they would give you the results from all of your 12th graders who took it this year, all the 11th graders who took it in 22-23, and any 10th graders who took it in 21-22. So it would be kind of this, we capture them, you get the final score in the 12th grade year. And they can do that technologically, whether or not it makes sense for school. To some degree, it's kind of what Dr. Moshe is asking. Does that make sense? Maybe we do better if we tested in 10th grade. How can we see that? So the science committee definitely, and RAND members, I think, felt pretty strongly too, that the current year methodology for aggregating the data would be the best approach. So this was the recommendation to CD moving forward. It's closest to real-time data because you can see how did our implementation, how has it been effective? So I think, as I mentioned before, a lot of the issue with science is it just hasn't been fully implemented yet, right? So that lag could kind of, if we waited for high school for an aggregate of information when students were leaving, we might not be able to capture whether we were making any progress on realigning our curriculum and making sure we had, because really in high school, it boils down to coverage. Well, actually at all levels, it boils down to coverage. Did we cover that content before we administered it? So this would give us real-time feedback. There also is some concern that you may end up with a student who transfers into your school and then you're held accountable for their score because they're not reporting out until 12th grade and they happen to be in 12th grade with you. They took it in 11th, let's say. And then one thing they did ask, probably what you're thinking too, Dr. Moshe, which is just, but we really would like to see that data for the cohort. So, this is maybe one of those things that appears on the additional reports page of the dashboard, right? So definitely people want to see the different ways in which the data could be represented. And this might be, something that's very, very doable. They certainly heard that, but I think in general, everybody's looking, give us a real-time data of the current year reflection. Now, that said, the one thing that wouldn't be able, the participation rate by definition, because you have until 12th grade to test students, the participation rate would have to be calculated using some kind of cumulative enrollment model. So that's the little disconnect there, right? Because you do have until 12th grade. So if you didn't test all your 11th graders, that's okay. But the participation rate would be another different calculation. Before I move on, last thing, I'll do this and then we'll see if there are any additional questions. Final thing is this baseball card, right? So we know we have these baseball cards for all the different indicators and in the equity reports, right? So for this year, they proposed a couple different baseball card models. You'll notice one thing that they were very proud of was that they came up with a new color teal. And I got to be honest, I honestly never really realized there's a small band at the top of the baseball card that reflects the color. And I never really noticed that. One of the things people said is, well, if you're going to pick teal, can't you make teal all the way through? Because I see the purple. And now we have an association with purple, right? Because of the college career indicator. And then 2 years ago, the entire dashboard was purple. So that was some feedback they got. But they were looking at one model in which, they do have to represent the status, which is and they propose this percentage met or exceeded. And then the change, which would be that number value difference from the prior year. And they can't actually put in increased, decreased, or maintained, because that's kind of official language that's assigned to, but once the 5 by 5, and you have the cut scores. So, in some cases maintained is actually, you can increase by a small amount distance from standard in order to get to still be in the maintained category. So they don't want to assign any number. They're just going to, or any phrase there, they're just going to put the number. But there is maybe that little, you can kind of see it looks like a little caret there. We suggested they improve the caret to maybe actually look like an upward arrow. I don't know, something that's a little more obvious that it went up or down, that it was an increase. So that's what would have to be here. Then the question is, do you put that grayed out dashboard wheel? One had it, one model had it, one did not. I think there's concern expressed from RAN that like not having it maybe looks like it's not done, it's not complete. So I think that everyone is leaning more towards the inclusion of a grayed out dashboard with some language that would reflect no color being assigned this year. So not reported in 2024 may not be quite what they see, but we gave them some feedback. So that's currently what I think the one on with the grayed out dashboard is most likely where they're leaning with some changes. Any questions? Okay, no questions. So just quick update on the dashboard student groups. The long-term English learners, this will be the 14th group being added. It's the first group added since the inception of the dashboard. So this is exciting. And for those of you who have any responsibility for the LCAP and have tried to calculate this, incredibly frustrating without actual data, right? We don't necessarily know. I was trying to help for LACOE's own LCAP. Well, how many long-term English learners do we have based on that? The language of 52052, which is the identification 7 years based on the initial identification. So after the dashboard is published, then we'll have a much clearer understanding of what the methodology they use, which then everybody can hopefully internalize to make their own. Just some of the considerations that they're going through right now. In terms of what they're looking at, so they're going to have to go back and look at, how many students were identified for they do a combination, and this is not new, but it's that initial US enrollment or the English language, the ELAS, English language acquisition status date, whichever is earlier, because, typically you enroll, then you're tested later, but there may be a little gap there. That's already used, either or, whichever is oldest. So they will be looking at those to determine cumulative enrollment, which is used in a number of the indicators, then doing the cohort calculations for grad rate and college career indicator, and then figuring out the assessment demographics. So who's a long-term English learner on CAASPP? And that's going to be somewhat different than what you see when you get the CAASPP website published, right? Because they're using a different definition. So once they've identified those long-term English learner criteria, then they will reach out to educational partners. What do you need to be able to communicate this? Because long-term English learners, because you have long-term English learners is not necessarily a reflection on your district. Number one, these students you may be a high school district. And so they're long-term English learners and they've just come to you for the first time, right? So they're not necessarily a bad thing. It's really more about serving the needs of long-term English learners. And so having data around them. So it's trying to make sure the message is clear. So, that's something that they're going to be doing some outreach. And I think you'll hear stuff through the AIM meetings maybe later this summer. But we definitely want to make sure that people understand, because, by definition, almost, we know that our long-term English learners are not going to be performing as well as our English learners because they're not going to have the incorporation of, on some of the indicators, recently reclassified English learners in the data, right? And so also they're, by definition, long-term English learners have probably missed out on a lot of opportunities. So, it's a concern. So they want to make sure that it's clear what this measure reflects.
We did have one question about when the CDE will release the list of LTELs.
We are about to get there, right? The list of LTELs, yeah, that's coming up in your slides.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. So Hillary's coming back up. There's some legislation that we're watching. And of course, we'll keep you apprised of, but we think this might be really relevant to assessment and accountability folks. We want to make you aware of it.
Okay. So these are just possible changes, and I think we have about 4 different bills we're going to kind of go over. So first, to kind of start us off, is the Assembly Bill 2268. It's currently moving through legislation, and in a nutshell, it would exclude transitional kindergarten students from the administration of the English language proficiency assessment of California, that we know as LPAC. If it is passed, it does have language in there, an urgency clause that requires 2/3 of vote of legislation. And what would happen is, if it's passed, then it goes into immediate effect for the 2024-2025 academic school year. There are some resources that we did link in here, state board meeting video that speaks a little bit more in depth. What's kind of interesting, my personal kind of takeaway, is the potential for what the future may look like with regards to any augmentation for the LPAC. Should there be a desire to, in the future, include TK students? So the possibility of potentially creating a LPAC that's developmentally appropriate creates, I think, both kind of an interesting and a collaborative challenge for the future. So kind of stay tuned as that's moving forward. Next, we have Assembly Bill 1984. And this bill really centers around capturing data associated with transfer students to and from alternative schools, county schools, and continuation schools. And whether or not that's a pupil-initiated transfer or a LEA transfer, the CDE is going to be requiring to collect and publish that data on DataQuest to provide information on what happens with those students. And what's kind of interesting is the author of this bill advocates for sharing that kind of information because it kind of highlights the disproportionality impacting Black and Brown students and differently abled students. And if they are transferred to an alternative setting, sometimes those outcomes aren't as great as we would like to see them. Again, what I think is kind of interesting with regards to accountability and transparency, and really maybe kind of spending time in the summer, not just looking at your academic performance, but also doing somewhat of a, I don't know, I would say, what do you want to call it, like a disciplinary autopsy, and looking at your current students at school and their incidents, and kind of understanding not just how, but why students are involved in these infractions, and maybe looking at the systems you have in place currently to support these kind of students before there maybe is a transfer. So stay tuned for more on AB 1984. Senate Bill 1355 was introduced by Senator Archuleta. In a nutshell, its aim is to streamline or reduce redundancy with regards to the amount of reporting documents that LEAs are required to submit annually. And I'm not going to ask in Zoom land, and I won't ask you to raise your hand if you're here, but if you wear the LCAP hat, some of you understand that this year and the new template, there's a lot of extra steps and a lot of dotting of I's and crossing of T's. This bill isn't passed yet, but it's getting a lot of traction just simply because of the idea of making sure that things are streamlined and that what we are reporting can be more appropriately targeted and less redundancy. So that's kind of what you have going on there. And lastly, the trailer bill for A through G, reporting cleanup. And so new to the LEA reporting requirement, which will be due in June of 2026. As you can see here is kind of just ensuring that things are properly coded and that you have them in your SIS system and that you're managing them, maintaining good records. I think the two big kind of takeaways here around the A through G reporting cleanup center around really establishing a system to review these courses in your SIS, in CALPADS and your A through G portal. And as we know that this will require some ongoing site level staff and counselors support who are responsible for reviewing these items and updating courses, including dual enrollment courses. I don't see anything jumping in there. So stay tuned. We'll put some updates in the digest. Data updates.
Just go check the chat here. I did want to point out the one thing that's interesting, and I will have to wait. The LTEL, it's not LTEL, the 2268, which could affect the testing of TKs. I'm not quite sure how that would then affect, because it does say initial identification in the language of 2268. And you'll note initial identification is also in that long-term English learner change in 52052, right? So it's 7 years from the initial identification. So I'm not sure that that would necessarily extend by 1 year when a student, you know, so if you had a student from TK on, that's a question that'll have to be answered moving forward. So stay tuned on that one, because the language initial identification is similar. I don't know if it is will have the same effect. Did you have a chance to check the chat? For some reason, it's not. Oh. So the question around long-term English learners. So there were a couple of, and I'll get to it one slide. There are a couple of recently released reports. Hopefully you saw these. So the dashboard 1-year graduation rate, which of course is no longer used for accountability purposes, but is for informational purposes. That was released in April under the dashboard additional reports page. So if you have a DAS school or you are a DAS school, make sure you and you serve grades 9 through 12, you want to check out that report, maybe incorporate that. I know some LEAs are incorporating that in their LCAP because it's a little more favorable. The grad rate for DAS schools, that methodology is definitely more favorable than the 4+ 5 year traditional grad rate report. Then also, just a couple weeks ago, DataQuest, we saw a pretty big release of the annual enrollment reports that includes the newly captured TKs, which now they have their own grade level as opposed to program record in CalPads. So TK is now its own grade. And of course, that will help as we try to parse out TK for the dashboard if it goes into any of those things. And that also includes a fall 1 enrollment downloadable data file. So if you're looking to capture any of the data that's coming out around fall 1, we use it here. So that's really helpful. It also includes your counts of staff demographics, the estimated teacher hires. This is your also the at-risk and long-term English learner data. This is the aggregate data for schools and districts. Your English learner acquisition status, distribution, EL students by language, by grade report. Prior year TK program data is now out. The free and reduced price meal downloadable data file, and then the unduplicated pupil count downloadable data file. These are all census day reports. Those may be things you want to look into. But of course, everyone's saying, well, what about the, and there are a couple things that are still pending. So we know we have SOAR system, the Student Online Accountability Record Status. It has 2 files that will be released. One is the College Career Indicator student level data files, which we've been waiting for. Actually talked to the CD when up there. It's prepared. I think they're just waiting on this long-term English learner file, right? And so this is the one that uses the old 313.1 data that they release every year. And I guess technically you're supposed to use it to incorporate to the notification that goes out to the families of these long-term English learners. The language of the Ed Code allows you to use a broader definition, which I think when you don't have this, it's easier to use a broader definition than to wait for this, but this should be out anytime now. I think this is what's holding up the college career indicator release too, is just the finalization of that. Then also we know that the data quest, the teacher assignment monitoring data will be out. Just like last year, it's a bear of a file to calculate. And so we expect that that'll come out probably in June. It should be out. They did note that if you had to go to your, take your local indicator to your board prior to the release of this data, because this data will be on your dashboard, that you're just supposed to skip that part of it and then come back and share that data with your board when the release takes place. I'm optimistic it'll happen before July 1. It did last year, but it came awfully close. It was very end of June. But also the big one, people are like, continue to ask about that reclassification rate. They assured us again that it'll be out, the reclassification. There's multiple years that are still pending release. And it's just because I know it's not very satisfying to hear this, but it's not mandated by Ed Code. The creation of this is, so it kind of takes backseat to like teacher assignment monitoring, which is mandated. And they do have some additional staff up there. So hopefully in the future, the reclassification rate will be calculated in a more timely fashion. However, and I will, we've been saying this, but in case you hadn't heard, if you have to calculate the reclassification rate for your LCAP, because it is a required metric, we do have some methodology that's included in our LCAP required metrics inventory that explains how you can do it using CALPADS files. So it'll give you the same number, a good, very close estimate based on conversations we had with the CDE. But yeah, the file itself is yet to be out. It will be posted to DataQuest. Yeah. Yeah.
Data release late, if it's released late. Do we need to formally do that report, or can we just do like a board?
So the question in the room was, when the TAMO data does come out, and you have to share it with the board, you're probably going to have to, it's probably not going to come out in a timely enough fashion to share it with your local indicators, which you have to present to the board in conjunction at the same meeting when the LCAP is adopted. So you have to go back with that data. It's a great question. Stump the band. I don't know exactly how you have to, it's just you have to share it with them. So I assume it's sharing at a public meeting. It is sharing in a public meeting, but I don't know what type of item it would be. It has to go, it can't be like a memo. I don't think it could do it like a Friday letter. It would have to be, it's technically is required to be shared at the next public meeting, but in what form? Maybe just an information item. Great question. So a couple of quick CALPADS updates. I know if you don't speak CALPADian, hopefully we're working out something for you next year for those of you who probably recognize the importance of understanding CALPADS, but are intimidated by it, which it's pretty intimidating. But first of all, I just wanted to remind everyone, and this isn't new information per se, it's actually a couple of years old, but there is guidance that came out this year in Flash 258, which reiterates Flash 219, which came out a couple of years ago with regards to capturing your reclassified students in a timely fashion. There's some very rules that are clearly defined what you can do. And I know we sometimes think, oh, well, the end of the school year, I can no longer reclassify. That actually is not accurate, right? You could reclassify even if the school year had ended. And this guidance in 219 is still applicable this year. Just change the school years in there with the current school years. But you want to make sure that you capture those kids who may be leaving you. Maybe you're a K-8 school district and you know those students are going to be matriculating to the next level. And so there's really clear guidance with regards to how to capture those students. It's articulated in Flash 219. And just so you know, this guidance is actually going to be enforced this year through a validation error in CALPAD. So if there's not an overlap in enrollment with the date, so you can't like, oh, we exited the student as of the end of the school year, and then we did the reclassification as of the day after the school year ended, it's not going to fly. You're not going to be able to upload that. So you're going to have to backdate to the last day of enrollment. It's all spelled out, but it's really, the intention is to make sure you capture all your reclassified students so you get credit for credits too. Then end of year is coming up. And I think this is really focusing on the message, which is it's a huge lift. and I support also our CALPADS network, and I reiterate this every time I meet them, but I'm taking it to you because I think CALPADS folks oftentimes don't have the ability to generate the kind of, I guess, goodwill or, goodwill, I guess, carrot, or the stick to make people help them. But really, the CALPADS has become so important in terms of generating the dashboard that it's really critical that it become a team effort. And if you're not already involved, I've got some resources here to share you, help you understand in a very accessible way what your role should be. So just to add to the importance of supporting your CALPADS person, and you may recall this, but Senate Bill 114 added some new criteria for technical assistance or differentiated assistance into Ed code for failing to submit data according to the timeline. So not getting your data certified by the deadline is a key component of that, but it also indicates that the data has to be accurate, correct, and submitted. So there's other factors that'll be going into it. And I know from the past, we've had LEAs that are like high performing, but then all of a sudden their A through G rate plummets. Oh, that was my district. Thank you. So, it does happen that you get, your data is submitted and it's incorrect. And, it's because whoever was looking at the data maybe didn't have the full context, right? So it always requires the people who are closest to those students who are generating that data to take a look at it to maintain its accuracy. And it's not always clear what, I remember the first time, and this is good 10 years ago, somebody said, hey, will you look at this report? Does it look right to you? I'm like, compared to what? I had no idea, right? And so actually there's some changes taking place with the reports that'll actually populate with prior year's data moving forward. These are CALPADS reports that have been updated based on feedback from the field. Hey, it'd be great when we're looking at that if we could see what last year's number was to see if it looks reasonable, right? And if it was unreasonable, then hey, or if we have attendance data and it says 0% absenteeism, that might be a red flag too. Like, did we really have 0%? So there are some new pieces. The reports will make it easier, but it's not just getting the data certified. So far, every LEA in LA County has certified their data on time. As to whether all that data is accurate, that's a different story. And so the implementation of this law could extend. And so technical assistance or differentiated assistance for CALPADS data could be extended. It's not quite the same. It'd be a 1 year of technical assistance. And if we don't quite know what that looks like, but you'd be working with us. So we're pretty nice. But it would be getting support to make sure everybody, and I can guarantee you the one message I'll make if somebody ends up with technical assistance is I'm going to go back to that district and say, you need to help your CALPADS person because it's not a one person show. It really requires a team. So the significance for the dashboard with regards to the end of year submissions, which are the ones that are forthcoming, they've got the deadline in July 26th and then the amendment window, which closed on August 16th. So the end of year one really captures all your college career indicator data, or quite a bit of it, not all of it, but quite a bit of it. Your end of year two, that's your program data. So your Title I, your Title I, but also then will in turn, this is your program records about free and reduced lunches, things like that. That data can also be critical in terms of your dashboard disaggregation, your student groups. But end of year three are the big ones. You got chronic absenteeism and suspension rate incorporated in there. And then we do this cohort poll. It's not actually a part of the certification, but it takes place at the same time where we pull the data from the online data store and they look at all the things that your graduating cohort had accomplished in addition to graduating, hopefully, all the things that they completed within the 4 years they were there, which would include all the things reflected on the college career indicators that require like AP. Did they pass 2 AP exams, right? Or did they complete their CAASPP with a 3 and a 3 or a 3 and a 2, which factors into all those variables. So all this data needs to be accurate in order for your dashboard to be accurate. And you can kind of see a breakdown of all the things that they look at, right? Including like, if you look at the cohort, like your UC CSU requirements. And we know we've talked to a lot of districts. It was my own district, and it was, I think I probably said this here before. I had just left the district and one of our key personnel at the high school, a dean of students, retired just in time for the end of year submission. So all the students that we had to hard code in as having passed the UC CSU requirements, because there are lots of variables, courses coming in, courses being taken at the community college, courses that they took at Laurel Springs, things like that. Nobody caught it. And so suddenly our A through G completion rate plummeted, right? And I've seen this elsewhere So these are all the things that someone who knows the data should be looking at during this process, right? Your end of year one, this is, where you want to look at your CTE completion and participation rate, your end of your work-based learning aspects. That includes for students with disabilities. End of year two, like I said, this is your program information. End of year three, this is where you get into your suspensions and your absences. So that's really critical to make sure that data looks correct. And then end of year four, which is all your students with disability information. So the process we go over more with our CALPADS network. I'm not gonna weigh everybody down here, but just some considerations around who should be included. Obviously, I think for the cohort, your school counselors are such a critical piece to this. If the school counselors aren't looking at this data, then there's a high likelihood that it's not going to be 100% accurate, right? For end of year one, you should definitely incorporate your CTE staff. Again, your school counselors. Who knows whether or not those students completed a course? It's not automatically generated. Somebody has to indicate they were a CTE pathway completer, and any site administrators who have oversight need to be involved. And then end of year two, and your program staff and your categorical programs people should be looking at that. Site administrators looking at that. End of year three includes, your EL services staff should be participating in this, your special ed, any attendance supervisor, anybody's looking at chronic absenteeism data, make sure that's right. And then finally, your special education staff and your SELPA for the end of year four, which is all your special ed data. So these are your key people. If they aren't part of that process, you're probably running the risk of having some inaccurate data on the dashboard. And so to that end, and this is a little taste of maybe what's to come. We have our good friends at Fresno County, I should say our good friend, Rebecca Aguilar, but her boss, Corey Greenlaw, facilitates this. She always says sharing is caring, and she is so forthcoming in sharing any resource she creates. She also certifies the CALPADS data for Fresno County, and she does amazing work with their resources. So she's put together this CALPADS end of year report review, and it's really done. She did a whole workshop for administrators and program managers, not CALPADS people. This is the non-CALPADian speakers, right? If you don't speak CALPADian, this is for you, right? So take a look at the link there. It includes little short videos that explain each of the end of your processes and what you should be looking for. It also has a planning document, so I can assign who's going to be looking at the data, what are the timelines, so you can plan out your end of year. And so if your CALPADS people, hopefully they come to our CALPADS network meeting. We've shared this in the past, but we want to make sure that everybody has a plan in place, who's going to be around to look at the data. And if you know your counselors are going to be leaving, make sure they're looking at that data sooner rather than later. And then it also links to all the report mapping guides for that detailed understanding and stuff. So great resource. I want to say this is a teaser because we're trying to work out. They approached us, Fresno County, and said, hey, we really think this would be helpful to take statewide, but because we're their not next door neighbors, but we're in the same regional support for system of support, they asked if they could start with us. And so next year we're looking to do a series of 3 workshops in kind of the timeline would be in conjunction with the fall 1, the fall 2, and the end of year submission that would be designed for non-CALPADS people. CALPADS coordinators may be coming with you, but it's primarily intended for people on teams to come in and learn how to better look at the CALPADS data during each submission. So it's going to affect in fall 1, that could include your business folks because it looks at, the fall 1 enrollment, right? We want to make sure we get the LCFF numbers, right? Fall 2, maybe I want to bring my HR person because this is all stuff that goes in the teacher assignment monitoring. So these are all, if we haven't dialed in the dates, we'll definitely let you know more. But the reception, to her stuff has always been incredible. So when she came to me, I was like, it wasn't even a question of whether we would want to do this, but so stay tuned for more on that.
I think it's really significant that she comes out of the counseling lens, and she had been a former counselor, and really brings that translation of that technical language into what it means to be an individual student, what those numbers mean for that individual student. So great. Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, Rebecca is, she came out of her background as a counselor, so she gets it, and she definitely looks at it from what are the outcomes for students.
Just a couple other resources we shared. The 2023 Connecting CALPADS, the Dashboard Handbook. The update is coming soon for this, so look for that. We'll, of course, let you know when it's released. But it's another good tool to kind of unpack and understand which reports you should be looking at to make sure your data is correct. And if you have any questions related to the end of year stuff, we're working with at least 2 districts right now to look at that data. There's still time to capture issues, right? You know, this cohort is about to graduate. If your college career indicator last year didn't look like you expected it to look, that doesn't mean you have to wait another full cycle to capture it. There's still time to capture some of the things that may be misrepresented or you hadn't captured before. So please reach out to us. We could walk through your concerns. And certainly when they release that college career indicator student level data file, that's a good one to go back in and go, okay, I know what this student completed A through G, but they didn't get reflected on the dashboard that way. Why not? And to kind of challenge your systems or processes to look at the way that you look at your data. So take a look at some of these things if you're in that mode, and certainly we're happy to support you. And now, a couple professional learning. I forgot about these things. So a couple things I wanted to point out. One is this upcoming, it's actually on the CAASPP website. It's this WestEd and CDE and SCOE produce this annually. It's this data leadership training series. I've participated with them for the last 3 years. I'll be honest, I steal a lot of the material that they create because it is so good. It's about looking at your CAS data. Of course, your CAS data is coming out now. Don't want to brag or nothing, but my 11th graders did pretty good. It was the first time they tested since 6th grade, which was kind of crazy because of the pandemic and other things. So I was really excited to see their data, but this will allow you to look at your data in SIRS this summer and make do some work with that. I think in the past, we've had some of our LEA folks who've joined the panel, the shared practice panel at the end. In fact, Sarah Nitzos was on the panel, I believe, last year. So there's always something to get from this series. I highly recommend checking it out. Also for next year, we have a flyer that's posted on the Canvas page. We've set our dates for next year. I do want to point out, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're still going to be doing hybrid. Don't panic about that. But even like this morning's activity, like the warm-up activity, it's really hard to engage. I would say hybrid meetings are kind of the worst of both worlds. I think if you're online, it's not great. And if you're in the room, it's not great. So what we're going to do is we're going to maintain the hybrid. So from 9 to approximately 11, we want to make sure we have a window to cover everything. We're going to pretty much present as if this were an online meeting. And for the folks in the room, that may mean we won't have a lot of turn and talk opportunities. They don't always work out great anyway, because we can't get people to engage in breakouts. So mostly be kind of sit and get, but it's the critical stuff that you need to hear. But in order to incentivize, and I don't want to say that a good meal isn't incentive enough, but it hasn't worked out great. Although the people who are in the room, I really appreciate you being here. But we want to do something a little bit different. So we're going to offer these little bonus sessions immediately following. So for the folks in the room, they're going to get the advantage. We're going to shut down Zoom and we're going to go full in-person mode where we can actually engage with you, have longer, richer discussions, and they won't be things that you have to hear. If you're in Zoom land, you'll still get the critical information. But if you're in the room, you're going to get an extension. And maybe that extension on one of the meetings will look at like, oh, let's look at how we can disaggregate our CAS data and understanding how to really drill into it. Things like that. Things that you would benefit from knowing in your job or your membership or assessment and accountability role. And then, an opportunity to network with folks in the room, which is something that's sadly missing. I really feel like the opportunity to get to know other folks in DAN is kind of one of the things we've never been able to quite capture with hybrid. And then, and breakfast. So there you go. So that's our plan for next year. And if we have extension activity that's just so great and you're like, I can't be there, but come to our district, well, consider bringing it to your district too. Just, we don't want to deny anybody something that sounds good, but we're going to try to make these extension activities really appealing to get more people to show up. Then we also have, this is, we're really excited about this actually. Our colleague Stephanie Fortunato, previously of the assessment unit, she works with the 21 CSLA now. And she approached us, said, I was talking to somebody from CDE and they said, what'd be great is if we could do kind of a dashboard 101 for school level leaders. And so we got together and we actually came up with something we think is even better, which is a data-driven practices around the California dashboard, but not exclusively the dashboard. It would include CSRS, the dashboard, the CAASPP website, basically any of the releases, but designed with the school leader in mind. So this could be someone who's brand new to the role, but anybody who's got to, work with their school site council, their ELAC, any group that they have to present to. We're really going to build on the data culture within schools and focus on how to better understand the data sources that are out there. So this is going to be an ongoing series. We're going to do a full in-person meeting in August, on August 12th. And then moving forward, everything would be online. There'd be 4 other sessions throughout the year, about an hour and a half on Zoom. So we're really excited for this. If you have any school level leaders in your district, if you're a district leader, or if you are a school level leader, and you're joining us today and you're interested in this, the link of the flyer is posted, and we would love to see you at those meetings. The first one is in person because we do want to make sure we get to know some people. And as we close out, I just wanted to say, reach out to us with anything. This is our team. I mentioned we have a new senior data processing specialist, Roy, in the back of the room. Hey, Roy. We really are excited for the work we're doing moving forward and the ways we can support our LEAs. And I'm going to now hand it over to Steven.
So my name is Stepan Bartlett. I work for Los Angeles County Office of Education, Assessment Unit within the Division of Curriculum and Instructional Services. I'm going to look at a few of the updates we saw through RAN over the meeting that was about a week ago, and also additional updates as well. Marcus is here in the Zoom version, so isn't here in person, but after Stepan's presentation, he'll deliver a few assessment updates, call drivers, and concerns from the perspective of ETS and operations. So look forward to that as well. Stay on after Stepan for that content. So here we are at our first update from CDE from RAN. They indicate that they are in the process of applying to a competitive grant to state assessments program. That's through the Department of Education from the U.S. Department of Education. They indicate that proficiency on state assessments being required under Title I Part A of ESEA is a primary indicator of student academic achievement, and thus their primary measure of state success in meeting the goals of ESEA. And so in view of that critical importance, the importance of those assessments, U.S. Department of Education made a competitive grant available to state educational agencies that help enhance the quality of assessment and accountability systems. CDE from the state of California is seeking an improvement grant in this current cycle. There is a new CAASPP and LPAC website. The soft launch of the redesigned CAASPP and LPAC website began earlier this month, allowing time for LEA coordinators to become familiar with the new website. The full launch date and the retirement of the CAASPP and LPAC websites, the independent ones, will occur July 3rd, so just about a week and a half away. At that time, or excuse me, a month and a week and a half away. At that time, CAASPP website and LPAC website will no longer be available. Key web pages from those websites will be redirected to the new site for any users that have created bookmarks using the retired websites. And if you have not already introduced site and school staff to the new website, you should do so prior to the end of the school year. So right around that time of rollover and transition, July 3rd, as we move into the new testing season for the initial LPAC. As assessment window closes for another year, ETS's most recent email reminds us of the systems approach that we must have at the closeout of assessment. And you want to ensure that condition codes for parent guardian exemption and not tested due to medical emergency and TE for each student's test are populated in the system. There's instructions in the CAASPP and LPAC TOLMS user guide. Request for extension to the LA selected testing window must be made before the selected testing window closes. You want to contact Marcus or your LEA success agent to request an extension of up to 10 days. Of course, that date cannot be past the date you close instruction or that regulatory testing window. And the window for that has shortened. Of course, it should not affect many or any LEAs in Los Angeles County. That has shortened to the end of June. If your season, your year goes beyond that date. Stairs cases and appeals need to be filed prior to the end of the testing window. Reset or reopen appeals requested must have time to retest or reopen and complete that test, of course. Be sure to get those completed ASAP so that that can occur. Unless a student's transferring within the academic year, looking at CALPADS, so each of these systems involved in testing, CALPADS, make sure that promotion or exiting of students in CALPADS happens after the selected testing window ends, preventing incorrect demographic data and errors being transferred to the TOMS website. So incorrect information would populate those SSRs or any material if that might occur if it ends up being done before the testing window closes. Looking at release dates, many of our LEAs have already seen 60–70% SSR release. So looking at those dates for release, student score data file, SIRS estimated release, and SSR estimated release are all anticipated to be congruent or along the same timeline. So all those three different methods of release, the SIRS, TOMS, and SSRs are posted on the new website, and shown here are estimated release dates for 23-24 CAASPP and LPAC assessment results. For each of those, initial LPAC, initial alternate LPAC results are available throughout the year, of course, usually within 2 days of completion of all 4 domains. But if you visit the each of those websites, you should have access as of these dates. Late May, many of our LEAs have found that they have the CAS scores, the ELA, the math, the science scores already for many of those students who tested early in the testing window, and LPAC summative SSRs also have started rolling in. Although much more CAASPP scores than LPAC so far. Finding 100% completion of Tier 1 audits in these new test security audits. ETS noted at the RAND meeting that their primary concern in the 23-24 testing window precipitating Tier 2 audits have been twofold: missing Moodle LPAC AST administration scoring training LEA certification, and security breaches. So each LEA must complete the initial and summative LPAC LEA certification. And there's also a single alternate LPAC AST certification course that covers the initial alternate LPAC and summative alternate LPAC required for LEAs with students assessed with the alternate assessments. And they were concerned, of course, with security breaches that, and I believe TikTok was named individually amongst the social media, but posting of social media, hiding that post and only making that available to assigned individuals also was a concern. Looking forward to LPAC. LPAC, of course, the systems continue to grow. You know that there are, of course, alternate assessments for both initial LPAC and summative LPAC. And as you are most likely aware, the optional LPAC interim assessments are available this year. And as we close out LPAC this Friday, May 31st, I'll address some of the recent updates and interject just a few notes on trending for the upcoming initial LPAC season. ETS had a concern on missing LPAC data DEI, data entry interface scoring. And they have been sending you weekly emails for some time now, I believe about 4 weeks of those weekly emails. And if you're receiving those or have not received them yourself, reach out to your LEA LPAC coordinator and ask them if they've been receiving these. These emails are reminders sent out from the do not reply at ets.org email address of students whose scores have been completed, or excuse me, testing have been completed, but whose scores have not been entered into for the speaking domain into the system, into the DEI. All scores need to be entered in the DEI by the end of day this Friday. That's May 31st. DEI scores cannot be entered after the summative test administration window ends on Friday, and both LEA LPAC coordinators and site LPAC coordinators can track their DEI entry data by running a report. This has been sent as email, but you can track it yourself, of course. The LPAC student completion status report in TOMS. It's found in the reports tab, and you can compare these two columns P and Q. It'll say completed under column P, and Q will say not started. You can see I've got a diagram here of using the data filters in Excel after it's been downloaded. Moodle, 2024-25 initial LPAC and initial alternate LPAC administration and scoring training have opened. CE recommends LE certification is completed by August 2nd, so just a few months away, to ensure that test examiners can be trained prior to the first day of classes. Of course, if you are going to be doing summer testing, you want to make sure that you have that completed before the summer testing begins. And of course, you are undoubtedly aware that the LPAC window is closing. The 23-24 summative LPAC and summative alternate LPAC testing window closes this Friday, May 31st, as I mentioned. And the initial LPAC and initial alternate LPAC testing window closes on the end of June. And then a new season for the initial LPAC will open that following 3rd of July or after the rollover is complete. You may have received an email about secure destruction. So you have the option to either securely destroy test materials locally or return materials to ETS for destruction. I'm sure Marcus might have something on this himself. You need to inform ETS of the method of destruction. That's due on July 15th. They have a online form for you to make that election. In that destruction, you want to make sure you're not destroying any of your writing answering books for grades K through 2. Those need to be scored, so they need to return to ETS in those white cartons for scoring. Old timers may know this as the North-South Information Meeting. The 2024 Assessment and Accountability Information Meeting is now open for registration. So those are going to be on August 1st, August 8th, August 15th. Those are Thursdays. Those are all 2 to 4 p.m. And each of those will have these individual topics. You'll see national, international tests, PFT, high school equivalency, interim and formative assessments. That's all going to be addressed on August 1st. You'll see August 8th, summative assessments like CAASPP and LPAC will be addressed, and then looking at dashboard and accountability on the 15th. So be sure that you get yourself on that list. A few reminders for the summative LPAC. As we near the completion of the 23-24 LPAC testing season this Friday, mandatory training for next year's initial LPAC has begun. Just as with the CAASPP, English, Math, and Science score reports, we'll see this year updated score reports for LPAC. Though originally expected to be released around a week from, these have started to be released, and you see that rolling release began last week. And of course, we're going to see new initial LPAC SSRs starting in July, just about a month from now. So initial LPAC won't change until that point. Turning to CAASPP, same thing for the CAASPP. We have new SSRs for CAASPP, and of course, CAASPP testing season is nearing completion as school years and state scheduled testing calendars end. Depending on how early the window you began testing, you may have a large percent of your SSRs already released. Starting in 23-24, those students and families will receive redesigned SSRs. They're consolidated for CAASPP and ELPAC. Some of the redesigned SSRs are consolidated for the CAASPP test and would be separate from the ELPAC test. But feedback from students, parents, and educators guided a redesign process, which led to consolidated student score reports containing much more detailed information, clearer language, images. Student performance is easier to understand with quick access to additional information and resources to further support student learning. You'll see Lexile levels, those consolidated claim areas, and a lot of additional information, the return of comparative scores as well. Looking at the integration of, or the cross-reference of CALPADS with ELPAC, there was a recent CALPADS flash number 272, which is technically speaking, it's CALPADS and accountability. So I'm just mentioning this from the standpoint of assessment and managing assessment programs. So that describes some strategies for ensuring a field within CALPADS, which drives the exemption for English learners who are in their first 12 months, is accurately populated and is accurately driving that exemption. So there is a specific field in the student information file, and you want to make sure that that is populated correctly. There's some guidance in this update flash that can guide you in discussing this with your CALPADS coordinator, if you're a CALPADS coordinator, looking at ensuring that's correct. That also drives numbers for LTELs, so also very important. Looking at performance tests that are embedded in learning. Just a little background on what PTELs are and their importance in future plans and their current use, and then some homework based on that. If we look at the CAST Innovations concept paper, which was dropped in the January State Board of Education meeting, there is a proposal for an approach that would include performance tasks embedded in learning, PTELs, P-T-E-L-S, or with a plural, that provide teachers and students authentic and engaging experiences through doing science. So this is PTELs in the science test as proposed for exploration. A PTEL would allow students perform or demonstrate their knowledge and conceptual understanding. So the nature of critical thinking in science, for example, or collaboration as a second example, is not identical to that in literary analysis or in history. And because CAST, the California Science Test, is a domain-based assessment grounded in the NGSS, the California NGSS, and because the California NGSS addresses some of these skills, a future direction might be to begin incorporating such competencies into the assessment system. So classroom PTELs, the performance tasks that are embedded into learning, and common PTELs would be the places to begin that exploration through, for example, tasks requiring collaboration. So scoring might then include aspects of collaboration for individuals and separately for the groups. They're all speculative and forward-looking thoughts about what science assessment might look like in the future. The only current summative assessment incorporating PTELs, performance tasks embedded in learning, is the CAA for Science. And that's a computer-based assessment that's administered one-on-one by trained test examiners who are familiar with the students and their needs, but the test consists of 4 embedded performance tasks. Each embedded performance task consists of a collection of activities and questions which are to be administered after related science concepts are taught to students. So teachers determine the best time to administer the performance tasks and embed them into learning. However, ETS or CDs found that data for administration is showing that these CAAs for science are being administered predominantly across the state as end-of-year summative assessments rather than performance tasks embedded into learning. So the reason I gave you the anticipation of the future and the current use and the actual current use is as an encouragement to work with your systems and ensure that those CAAs for science are embedded in learning. We'll see how that works and prepare for hopefully an innovative approach to science assessment in the future. If your LEA is currently embedding them into the school year, even at a single classroom, I'd love for you to drop in the chat the name of your LEA and maybe a contact information. I'd like to reach out to you and ask you, what is that looking like? How is that working for you? How are you managing that from the district or the site administration level? If you are actually embedding those PTELs for the CAA for science into your instruction, drop your name in the chat. I'd love to talk to you. All right, and the most exciting thing I have to deliver, the most exciting news here I have to deliver, Evan already delivered, and it's that coming soon we'll have Sarah Netsos as a coordinator here in assessment and be here to support you with vast and extraordinary knowledge of assessment, and looking forward to that, absolutely. Looking forward to the next few weeks in terms of professional learning within the assessment unit. We've got an administrator institute this Thursday the 30th, and there's still time to register if you like, and a data-based action that you can use to address your assessment data for this current year and look out for long-range planning. Hopefully we'll have some LEAs from LA County discussing some of the best practices that they've used in using data in the past and how that might have affected this current year. Those are all available, of course, in the assessment unit catalog for the Canvas catalog. There's 2 separate professional learning opportunity sets, one for accountability and data literacy in that Canvas catalog, and then the assessment unit has got a separate listing there as well. I'll try to drop those in to the chat. I believe that normally Marcus would come right after me to address some call drivers and do a ETS focused presentation. However, we are time constrained for Dr. Mekhitarian, and he will be presenting next, and then we'll see Marcus after Stepan and the presentation on financial literacy. So great to see both of them, and we'll see Marcus right after Stepan.
Awesome.
Stepan, is that you?
Yes, good to see you, Stephen.
Okay, it's great to see you.
It's been a while.
I'm going to stop share and allow you to take over the share.
Perfect. Give me one moment. All right, fantastic. So good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you. The last time I was here was actually as Director of Assessment and Accountability at Glendale Unified. Since then, I've been in a new role at Intuit for Education, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to share with you a free resource, which is, I think, going to be very pertinent in the coming months as financial literacy is on the ballot in California in November. And if that ballot passes, and it looks like it's going to this year, financial literacy is going to be a mandate throughout California. It already has been a mandate in several states, and California is a state where the conversations have come up in the past, and it hadn't quite pushed through, but it looks like this year has built enough momentum to proceed. So just wanted to briefly share a free resource that I think a lot of districts are going to be looking for in the coming months. The reason I transitioned to Intuit for Education, honestly, is for very personal reasons. I came to the U.S. as an immigrant, fleeing a war-torn country, Lebanon, and my parents just came here They had no family here. They just had a family friend, which is how we ended up in California. And I had to figure a lot of what I'm about to show you on my own, as I'm sure many of your students at your districts have experienced something similar. My parents didn't know how loans work, how credit scores work, nothing. And so I had to grow up very fast to figure all that out. And I really could have benefited from financial literacy in school. Instead of having to falter and kind of figure out how to navigate the system all on my own. And so when I saw there's an opportunity to share this type of free resource with districts, I took the opportunity to be part of that movement, especially as it's picking up steam in our own state as well. So what I'm going to share with you is Intuit for Education's free financial literacy coursework. Should you choose to use it, again, it's 100% free. The professional development is free. So this is basically part of Intuit's corporate responsibility arm. So nothing that we have here is for sale. You might, if the name Intuit sounds familiar, but you're not really sure where you've heard it from. It's the company that creates TurboTax, QuickBooks, MailChimp, and Credit Karma. So Intuit for Education is a collection of 2 courses. One is for personal finance and one is entrepreneurial finance. Both of these courses are free. So far, everyone I've shared it with, so when they say they're going to sign up their students, they say, I'm going to sign up myself too, because I could really use a crash course in financial literacy myself. The topics that are included are banking, budgeting, savings, credit, investing, for helping students figure out how to pay for college, which is, of course, more expensive now than ever, insurance, taxes. The entrepreneurial course helps students figure out how to start and manage a small business. And there's a lot of other courses as well. Honestly, it is pretty comprehensive in terms of the content that it covers. These courses are all aligned to national financial literacy standards, and they're also being aligned to each state standard as well. When you go into the coursework, you can see how each course's alignments are set up. And you'll also be able to see that we've thought very carefully about how to make this with the teacher in mind. So the courses are very customizable, which means that you don't have to just go through them in sequence. You can just take certain parts of each course and assign them to students. You can also teach in 2 different formats. So one of them is teacher guided, where you gather the materials, you teach the class like you normally would, and all the content is there for you. There's also a self-paced version where students can go in and do this entirely online without the teacher, and that would be could be a great option for let's say independent study, or for continuation schools that want it to be done in a shorter amount of time. Personally, for me, if I were in the classroom today, I would probably do it as a combination of the 2, where my entire class is assigned a particular unit, and then while they're working, I'm pulling small groups of students and working with them on the specific areas that they need support with. That way, I'm being much more targeted with my approach, and I'm making sure that my students are able to move forward, while also making sure I'm giving students the support in the specific areas that they need. There are checks for understanding built throughout, and I'll hop in just a few moments and kind of give you a quick navigation of the site, but it also includes simulations as well. So, for example, when it comes time to paying for college, there's FAFSA options to explore. If they're doing the entrepreneurial course, QuickBooks will come up. They'll be able to use the QuickBooks simulator to be able to see how to actually set it up. TurboTax gets incorporated when in the tax unit, so students can actually see where to include information on their tax return, what the consequences are for them. There are calculators built in as well. So let's say we're talking about auto loans. What would that look like if you decide to finance a particular product? Versus, under different terms, what will be the net consequence for you? So it's really, really a comprehensive solution to financial literacy. And as I said earlier, I'll say it again, everything you're seeing is 100% free. So there's no cost to it. And we're also a very agnostic program in terms of, if you're using something else right now, like EverFi, no problem. We're not looking to replace any programs you currently have in place. We just want to be able to supplement and provide these resources in addition. So a couple of organizations, for example, have shared with me what they currently have, and I'll go through and do a crosswalk and say, great, keep all those. Here are a couple of topics that we have that your program didn't, and you can just supplement them if you want. You'll see a lot of this Intuit for Education content in Khan Academy currently, and it also appears in Quizlet and Kahoot as well. And we've partnered with EverFi, Next Generation Personal Finance. So it really is a collaborative effort to make students become more financially literate, especially during the time where not only is it potentially going to be a mandate, but also times are tough when it comes to for students paying for college, figuring things out. Everything we know has gotten more expensive. So this information, I think, is more critical for students at a young age than ever. Data privacy, for a teacher to sign up, they would just need to put in their email and their name, and that'll be all it takes for them to get into the system. Then they can just send a code to the students. We don't gather any student information. If they do the online version, then it would be the name and email. If they're doing just the teacher guided version, then there's nothing collected at all. And the coming months, we're actually going to be integrating with the most popular LMS programs. And if that happens, then that eliminates that data piece entirely. Last thing before I actually show you a quick demo, everything I've shared, in addition to being free, we also offer free professional development to make sure that teachers feel comfortable, not only with Intuit for Education, but with financial literacy instruction in general. And so we offer free professional development, both live, and we'll also have on-demand versions on the website as well. So you can kind of do it in a way that works best for you. And we ultimately just want everyone to feel really comfortable with financial literacy. So with that said, let me just give you a quick tour of the site. So when you go in, you can see there's personal finance, entrepreneurial finance, the two courses I mentioned, and these are the self-paced versions that students can do on their own. So if I go to personal finance, here are all of our topics. If I go to, let's say, savings, you can see the different topics, how long they'll take, and then all the content is here. So the learning objectives are listed at the top. The standards that they're aligned to are listed here as well. And then you can see the lesson plan content will pop up along with the actual slides that the teachers can use. And then we've also got worksheets, answer keys, activities with Quizlet and Kahoot to make it a little more engaging, checks for understanding as well. Now, if you go back and go to the self-paced version, let's go to personal finance again. And if I go to savings here, you'll see that these ones are set up to be entirely online. So we've got videos, we've got activities, we've got checks for understanding. And so these ones are entirely guided, self-paced entirely on the website.
Imagine a life of unlimited time to travel, enjoy your hobbies, and visit with friends and family as much as you want.
So I know this is a super quick crash course in it, but as I said, in November, this is potentially going to be a mandate. So I encourage you to take a look at this. I'm going to include my email and my phone number in the chat. You can reach out. I'm happy to meet with you and kind of give you a quick demo, answer any questions you may have. If you want to explore the site on your own, you're welcome to as well. Most of it is ungated, so you can just go to Intuit for Education and log right in, and or sorry, not log in, just hit explore and be able to see what the content on there already. But you can reach out to me anytime as well. I want to make sure that you feel very comfortable with this. As so many mandates are, this is most likely going to be an unfunded mandate. So schools are often going to work on where are we going to incorporate this now. It seems like one more thing we have to add. So we're happy to meet and find ways to help do some of the legwork in terms of, let's say, if the content's going to be incorporated into economics, we can help you kind of navigate that process. If you are potentially going to make this a one semester course that's going to be the supplement of the ethnic studies course that's coming, that could be another place to do it. But I just want to be your partner in making sure you feel like you have everything you need to incorporate financial literacy, whether it's entirely through Intuit for Education or whether it's through another program. We're here to just support and make sure that this transition is as smooth as possible. So with that, let me stop sharing, see what questions you may have, and then I will put my contact and the website in the chat for you as well while we do that. And Evan, thank you for putting the website in the chat right there as well. And then my email and phone number are there. Are there any questions about getting started?
Don't see any in the chat yet, but maybe in the room. Not yet. Stepan, who else should know about this at a school district? I'm taking this back. Curriculum instruction.
Curriculum instruction. So I'll be working with other departments in LACOE to make sure that this gets out to as many folks as possible. Honestly, as we know, every district is a little bit different in terms of who the lead would be at the district. We've noticed that a lot of times it's happening through the CTE program. So the CTE lead would be a good person to share this information with. In some cases, it's the curriculum and instruction department, teaching and learning. So it's a little bit all over the place. Part of that is because the requirements are so different from state to state too. So, for example, some states have a year-long mandatory course, some have a half year, some don't have a separate course at all. They're just embedded into economics or embedded into math. It really is, varying by state. So in California, I believe the BALA is set up to be a one-semester course on its own, a standalone course. So a lot of content will be needed to develop that. And I remember how I used to do it as a teacher. I got the resources and the content, but I always incorporated my own, selection of other resources to sort of help maximize learning. I didn't just go with whatever one resource was and did it in sequence. So I'm picturing how I would use this, and it would be as probably like my main source, essentially my textbook, but then I'd be incorporating other pieces as well. I love the fact that Intuit for Education already incorporates a lot in there just to sort of help, make that a reality right out of the gate. So that's why you see Khan Academy incorporated in there, Quizlet, Kahoots, Next Generation Personal Finance, EverFi. It really is a lot of different people coming together to make sure that, the programs are all solid and ready for your financial literacy to be maximized in the classroom. If you shoot me an email, just say maybe send a couple of times when you might be available. I can give you anyone who's interested a little bit more of a detailed review and answer any questions you may have. I just want to try to be mindful of time here. Appreciative of the few minutes I had, and I don't want to take us off schedule. So that's why I'm being short and sweet.
Well, thank you, Stepan. We always appreciate having you back. You've always been such a good friend to Dan. So we hope this isn't the last time we see you, but if you get any additional materials, I know you have a flyer you're working on, we'll be sure to send that out to everybody in the field. And I think it's a great opportunity. Everywhere I go, people always say, I know I've reached out to you because my own school district, I saw where my kids attend, people were asking about this for middle school. And I said, well, yeah, I know somebody you need to talk to. So I know it's a growing interest in a lot of school districts.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, as always. And it's just wonderful to be back in the DAN meeting. So even though it's in different shoes, but I am very much appreciative, and it's always wonderful to see the team.
All right. Thanks, Stepan.
Thank you.
Next up, we did get Marcus was able to join us. So fortunately, Marcus, you have co-hosts, so you can feel free to share your screen. And if you have questions for Marcus, you might start dropping them in the chat. Marcus is going to tell us about some of the most recent call drivers and anything else that ETS has seen and reminders.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. Hello, Stepan. Nice to see you again. I hope things are going well for you.
Thanks, Marcus. Great to see you as well.
Just a couple things. I do want to address some of the questions that I saw from Dr. Moja and also Carla as well. So I understand Tom's doesn't have the EL exemptions like they do for the PGE and the NTE status. However, the student test assignment report, I believe it's column QA or Q, one of the columns, it actually does show the exemption. So I know it's not as intuitive as you would like it to be within Tom's, be able to apply those exemptions, but you can always double check the student test assignment report, and it'll actually show based on the student's US enrollment date if they are exempt or not. So just keep that in mind as well. Just a couple things I'm going to go over here. I'm going to share a slide here in just a moment. Just going to be just a few minutes, nothing too long, crazy. I've edited and shortened some of my presentation as well, just to a lot for the current time at this time. Okay, you should be able to see that there. I'm just going to start from here. So this is a very important one I'd like to begin with currently. And this is in regards to STAIR specifically. So as we get close to the end of the testing window for summative LPAC, any STAIRS cases in regards to not just LPAC itself, but this applies to students that are taking both assessments. If there's any demographic level changes, some of you have worked with me in the past, and for this past administration, year regarding those changes. It's a somewhat complicated and complex process. So as we get near to the end of the testing window this Friday, many of those cases, if you do have any that appear regarding specifically demographic information changes and more specific to grade level changes, if a student goes forward in a grade or back in a grade and they've already begun testing for CAASPP or LPAC, those cases will be taken on a case-by-case basis at this time. And there's not any guarantee that those stairs will be completed prior to the closing of that May 31st window. So please just keep that in mind. As we draw closer to the end of the window, it's important to submit those cases as early as possible if you're able to catch those. And again, they're going to be taken by a case-by-case basis at this current time, since we're so close to the end of the window. Just a couple of reminders regarding the current Summit of LPAC that we have going at this time. Just make sure, again, I always try to make sure that the demographic information, and this goes back to what I had mentioned before about the stairs cases, as best to your abilities in working with your CALPADS administrator, please make sure all the correct demographic information has been listed for those students and at least 48 hours prior. Again, as we get close down to that window, we want to make sure that those updates are being done as soon as possible so that the information can register in both TOMS and the test delivery system. So just please make sure that being completed as soon as possible so that the students can test before the deadline. As our K through 2 materials are sent back to us for processing and scoring, again, only students who are K through 2 will require those answer booklets to be sent for scoring. Grades 3 through 12 will test all online. So just let your site coordinators know that information as well. Now, this is one I've been coming across lately with many of the LEAs that either receive students later in the window. If you require any booklets for summative LPAC testing, just make sure that you're contacting any neighboring LEAs first, as the materials for kindergarten through second grade, they can be shared. So just so you know, if you have any students or incoming students that you receive before the close of the window this Friday, and you're able to update that information, first their demographic information so that they're able to test. If they are K through 2 students and they require booklets, but you've already sent your booklets back and do not have any other booklets, definitely work with a neighboring LEA, as those materials can be shared as well. So this is an important date as well, the last day to return those K through 2 answer booklets. So it has to be scheduled for a pickup by UPS by June 14th in order to be scored by ETS. Again, that is June 14th. The K through 2 answer books must be scheduled for a pickup by UPS in order for them to arrive to our processing plant and to be scored. And then when you're generating the UPS labels for a return, please ensure that you're retaining the tracking number that is generated to verify the return of those booklets. Unfortunately, TOMS does not have a report that actually shows when the booklets are picked up and when they are actually scanned into our warehouse. So please be aware of that. Your best bet to ensure that those booklets make it there is to make sure that you're retaining that tracking number prior or when you generate the UPS label so that you can track that using the tracking information provided via UPS. In that same vein as well, when they arrive, it typically doesn't indicate that they've been scanned into the system. So I know that there's some LEAs that have been curious about some K through 2, specifically grade 2 booklets being scanned, because a lot of them are checking completion reports at this time, and they're showing that the writing is still incomplete for a lot of those K through 2 students. We ask at this time, as we are processing those at this time, please be patient as we complete the scanning of the booklets and the scoring of the booklets. Those SSRs will become available on a daily basis and will update accordingly as well. There we go. Okay. So as we get close to the end of the Summit of LPAC window and also the CAASPP window as well, you can always check the completion status reports under the link section in TOMS. This is going to give you the most up-to-date information regarding the completion of the speaking DEI and of the other domains as well. Unfortunately, the completion status reports here will not include if the booklets have been scanned unfortunately. But using the completion status report, you're going to get a more real-time estimate on when the students are completed, whether that be for LPAC or for CAASPP as the windows close accordingly as well. This can be accessed through the, again, the TIDE system under the link status. This is what it's going to look like on your side when you log in. Plan and manage testing is going to allow you to see and filter for specific students. Let me show you what that looks like. So it's going to allow you to choose your district, your school site, or if your site coordinator's logging in, it's going to allow them to see the school sites that they're at. And then it's going to allow you to look by either the first name of the student. It's going to give you multiple filters to go by as far as seeing the student's completion status as well. And then this is the specific filter, the get specific filter of that system. For the dropdown, you have all of those different options in the radio buttons based on what you're looking for. Typically, I use the students who have, and then when you select the dropdown, it's going to be have or have not are the options you're going to be able to select, and then completed and started for the next drop-down selection. And then the last one is always going to show first opportunity, because with the summative LPAC and the smarter balanced, there's only one opportunity available. But other than that, the other radio buttons can be selected if you're trying to look and pinpoint different parts of information regarding the student's completion. The next section is the search by SSID. So if you have any students who have completed, started, or in a paused status, you can actually look up, I believe it's up to 20 SSIDs as long as they're separated by the comma. And then when you click on generate report, it's going to allow you to see students, and it's going to show their status, the person who administered, the test session it was open under, and their other demographic information such as their name, SSID, school site, and so forth. So you're going to see a couple different fields there. Again, the statuses will vary. They can show as started, paused, completed, expired, reported, and submitted. Typically, submitted means that they just recently completed the test, and then reported shows that it is being sent for processing. Again, just a friendly reminder regarding the demographic information. I know I've touched on this multiple times, but it's a really, really important part of the testing, both for summative LPAC and for the smarter summative CAASPP testing for ELA math and science and for the alternates. Just make sure that that demographic information is being updated as soon as possible, and then that information is being pushed from CALPADS to TOMS so that we can ensure that those students that need the test have all of that information registered, not only in TOMS, but also the test delivery system. The second part of that is the student test settings. So when test settings are applied, whether that be through a file or through a manual upload and saved, please just make sure that you're allowing at least 2 to 4 hours before the student actually assigns and approves the student for that test to ensure that the test settings are listed there. So just make sure that you're waiting at least a minimum of 2 hours and up to 4 before the student actually enters. If you assign those test settings and you have the student enter immediately, most likely those settings will not appear for them because it takes time to register into the test delivery system. And then this is a friendly reminder regarding next year's rollover. So those are the dates for both the rollover years for CAASPP and LPAC that are listed there. Our CAASPP rollover is from June 28th to July 3rd. So during that downtime, all of our multiple of our systems are going to be down. And then for LPAC, it's going to be August 2nd to the 6th. And that's going to be from August 2nd, starting at 5 p.m. And then systems will resume on August 6th at 8 a.m. Now, while this does occur and this rollover happens, please ensure that you're downloading any of the reports and or information that you would need. Specifically, this is the great opportunity to download the actual forms that the user signed for their TOMS access, because sometimes there are educational audits that do occur at the LEA level, and many of those audit services request the actual forms that the users have signed. So before the rollovers occur, please log into TOMS and ensure that you're downloading the security forms and the actual PDFs of those forms that were signed before the rollover does occur. Again, just a reminder, the summative LPAC testing window will be closing this Friday. And then again, June 14th. June 14th, they need to be scheduled for pickup for the kindergarten through second summative LPAC answer books in order to be scored by ETS. And then with that, I will unshare, stop sharing here, and then address any questions as well in the chat if there are any here. Tier 1 surveys, Ava, I believe will be handled accordingly. I can see if I can, I'm not involved too much in that process directly, but I'll see if I don't believe you will need to go to tier 2, but I will double check to see if there's any information for you on that. Yeah, no, I understand, Chris. They do show up as missing until that later date in which they're processed. So I completely understand. So, and I've had that a couple times with some site coordinators who accidentally test those students. Fortunately, that is the report is only available at this time as an indication for students who will be exempt.
Marcus, would you mind, just because the folks in the room may not be logged in, to read the question when you respond? Thanks. Any questions in the room for Marcus? You have the mics at your table if you want to ask.
Yeah, Michelle, I can ask that. So yes, you do have access to Tide. It's going to be in Tom's, and if you click on the links button, you'll see it appear as a link for completion reports. Yes, so Roy, I'm addressing your question directly. There is a report you can look at in Tom's. It should be under the CAASPP LEA level student test assignment report. It's going to show based on the student's US enrollment date if they are exempt or not. And I want to say it's column, I don't have the exact report in front of me. It's in the Q's, I believe. QA, QZ, something like that. That is actually going to show ELA exempt on the actual the header, and it's going to say why or no listed there. Okay, let's say I see your question here. Give me just a brief moment as I just read it real quick. And that's a K through 2 booklet you're requesting from the LEA, correct? You want to come off mute? I can address that directly as well for you.
Hi there. I can't make my camera work. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
Yes, it is. It is a K through 2. It's a student from another school district who moved into ours. So now we're seeing him as incompleted. So we have 2. We've reached out to the school AP twice and the principal. I'm just not sure what to do. We've asked if we can go pick it up, but that test booklet, but we are getting really close. So we're not sure what our next steps are.
Okay, so it's just the speaking booklet they had and the speaking DEI that you're trying to complete, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you happen to know the name of the LEA by any chance? I could reach out on your behalf.
Yes. Should we talk offline about that?
Yeah, if you wanted to send me an email, just let me know which LEA and I'll see if I can assist from there and then give you some next steps as well.
Thank you. Can you put your email in chat for me?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Just going to send that to everybody as well. So if any LEA coordinators have questions, you can reach me directly at region11@ets.org. I'm also available via chat as well if you would like to chat in, or if you call me directly, it's going to be 800. I'll put it here as well. And then when you're prompted to on the phone, just go ahead and select 11 or region 11. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. Yeah.
And that last question, Alicia, I'm sure that's not an LA County district, so.
No problem. Yeah, Alicia, just reach out to me and then I'll see if I can work with the other LEA to see if we can obtain that booklet for you.
Thank you. I just emailed it to you. Thanks, Marcus.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, Marcus, I don't see any other questions in the chat. And I don't have any in the room. I would like to acknowledge the entire team from Bonita who came down today for the meeting. They got the one advantage was the carpool lane. It didn't make the traffic that much better, but everybody in the room who's here, thank you so much for coming in person. And like I said, next year we'll have some, I saw Chris Moja already volunteered next year to generate a first breakout activity, extension activity using the writing scores. So we're looking forward to that. More details forthcoming. Happy near end of the school year to everybody. Thank you for joining us online on Zoom. We'll get a recording of this up as soon as possible, as well as other resources, including Stepan, I think might have had some resources to share. Any questions that come in after the fact, we'll add to our Q&A that we'll try to get out just as soon as possible. So we appreciate your time as always, and hopefully you get a few minutes back to your day that you can take advantage of. And we'll see you next year, if not soon. Just a reminder, if you are a new DAN person, or if you know there's gonna be a new DAN person, we kind of skimmed over it, but a new DAN orientation in September. It'll be in person, but you don't have to be brand new, just kind of newish, right? So just kind of an emphasis. So we hopefully we'll see some of you then as well. So if you're relatively new to your role, come join us for that DAN member orientation. But thank you so much, and have a good rest of your week. Thank you.